From pole position, Thomas Strauven led off from the grid in the opening race of the F4 Spanish Championship weekend at Portimão, with Ean Eyckmans storming ahead of Jan Przyrowski. The field swarmed into the first corner, blissfully unaware that this was set to be one of the most dramatic weekends yet in Spanish F4. Nicolas Schaufler ran in fourth position, leading the charge after the top three. But René Lammers was struggling to make progress after a tough qualifying session. From the start of the race, Eyckmans was keeping his car as wide as possible to thwart the opposition, leaving both Schaufler and Przyrowski frustrated as Juan Cota caught them and joined in the fracas. So Strauven led convincingly ahead of Eyckmans, Przyrowski and Cota, with Schaufler now behind the Spaniard. Lammers had overtaken Andrej Petrovic and had his sights set on the top five. Eyckmans was already creating a concertina effect as he bottlenecked the field of cars behind him, allowing his countryman Strauven to extend his gap ever further. They call this circuit the roller coaster, and with many of the drivers experiencing the track for the first time in a car race, there would always be some tough moments. Filippo Fiorentino spun to the back of the pack and was in danger of being lapped, but fate played its hand and prevented it from occurring. First, Przyrowski looked after his tyres well and was clearly patient enough on the curbs. So when the door opened up for him in his duel with Eyckmans, he stamped his authority on the move. But then seconds later, the safety car would be called, as the newest face on the grid, Andre Rodriguez, found out at the first corner that these cars are not the easiest to keep in a straight line. The safety car retreated after 2 laps, and while Strauven set off on his victorious mission up front, the rest of the field descended into a phenomenal scrap. Eyckmans reclaimed second position, but there was the slightest contact, which would cause a puncture for Przyrowski, putting him out of the race at the bottom of the crest into turn 5. So the championship contender was out. And if we thought that was dramatic, we had no idea that another title protagonist would drop out of the race only 90 seconds later. Juan Cota was dueling with René Lammers, and the teammates collided into turn 1 and would be eliminated on the spot. The Dutchman was furious, the Spaniard was aghast, and the Belgian in the lead couldn't believe his luck. On the second restart, Strauven was coping with the crosswinds admirably, whilst behind he and Eyckmans, Renault Francote was trying every trick in the book to uphold the honours for MP Motorsport. But Nicolas Schaufler was still proving to be an immovable force in third place. And he wasn't the only Red Bull Junior having fun, as Chris Elfagali made a magic move to pass Vivek Kanthan and Noah Montero in the same moment, one of the overtakes of the season, round the outside into turn 1. Up front, the Belgians Strauven and Eyckmans continued in unison. Schaufler remained ahead of Francote, and now Nathan Ty had worked his way ahead of Petrovic. The Englishman was just able to stay in front, as Petrovic wasn't in a position to retaliate before the checkered flag. So for Strauven, it was win number 2 on a day when neither of his main rivals had scored, and so the Belgian was the new championship leader. 1 down and 2 to go. Could Przyrowski and Lammers strike back? Race 2 began in an almost identical fashion to Race 1, with Eyckmans once again splitting the Griffin Core teammates through turn 1. Lammers was in a better position this time, dueling with the Red Bull Juniors Elfagali and Schaufler, whilst Juan Cota was battling once more with Andrej Petrovic. However, as usual, it wouldn't be long before a safety car period bunched up the field once again. But this time, the resulting drama would be magnified in spades. The field cruised around behind the leader, and then war recommenced. Przyrowski would lose out to Lammers on the first corner, leaving the Red Bull pair to squabble amongst themselves behind. But it was just the prelude to what was to come. Lammers and Przyrowski dueling for what could eventually become the championship title. So Strauven was now leading Eyckmans, with Lammers and Przyrowski at each other's throats, and the Red Bull Juniors looking to get themselves onto the overall podium. It was tough and tight, but relentless all the way. The midfield were finding the high temperatures and strong crosswinds tough to handle, and almost to hammer the point home, Stepan Suzdov would lose control of his car in the tricky first sector of the lap. Fortunately, nobody would hit him, but another incident brought out the safety car again. On the second restart, there were fireworks, as Przyrowski made his attempt to repass Lammers. Incredibly, they made contact, which would have a devastating effect on both the race and the championship. Both drivers lost positions, but more was to come. Przyrowski was trying his hardest to hang on from Petrovic, and Lammers saw his chance to retaliate. The move was a bold one, and incredibly, there was contact yet again. This time, it was enough to drop Przyrowski down the field and out of the points. And despite his valiance, Lammers would later be penalised for the move and would also fail to score points. The battle became a war quickly, and each driver in the fight was doing their best to move forward and stay out of trouble, with Nathan Tai, Alfio Spina and Gino Trapper able to put themselves right up into the vanguard of the scrap. The midfield drivers were well aware that Lammers and Przyrowski were not going to score well in this race for the second race in a row, and that meant everybody wanted a piece of the pie. There might not be too many opportunities this year to steal big points off the top three in the championship. Lammers first had to deal with Andrej Petrovic and then the Englishman Nathan Tai. It was quite clear that Portimão was not going to be the Dutchman's weekend. All of this allowed Thomas Strauven to cement his position at the head of the pack, unchallenged and at least at Portimão undefeated so far. And whilst he took the maximum points for the second race in a row, his chief rivals ended without a points haul. It gave Strauven a huge cushion in the championship fight. Strauven and Przyrowski shared the front row for the third start, but this time they both moved away poorly, allowing the rookie Ean Eyckmans to storm ahead and grab the early advantage. Lammers had a lot more ground to make up from 10th on the grid, whilst Juan Cota was leading the charge after the top three. Once again, composure and tyre management would be the key factors in the race, whilst also dealing with the strong winds around the circuit. But Jan Przyrowski and Thomas Strauven were racing each other for second. Could they settle their differences and set off after Eyckmans in the lead? Lammers was battling with his former karting adversary Miguel Costa, who was putting up a brave fight. The other Dutchman at the front end fancied his chances too, but for René Franco, he didn't have the same fortunes as Lammers and spun the car at the top of the crest. How everybody avoided him is a miracle. Eventually, Przyrowski caught up to Eyckmans with Strauven right behind him into turn one, and the Polish ace made his move around the outside, grabbing the lead. The momentum was with his teammate Strauven, and in turn three, he was able to overtake Eyckmans too. A miserable moment for the rookie. Gino Trapper and Alfio Spina were once again knocking on the door of big points, as their confidence had clearly grown, and they wanted to reward the efforts of their teams. Strauven, meanwhile, knew that there was a chance for 3 wins in a row. It was possible, and therefore he increased the pressure, taking ever more increasing risks. But the pole was a match in defence for the Belgian in offence. It would need a stroke of genius to wrestle the lead away, and with a well-timed slipstream and nothing to lose, Strauven would grab his advantage into the first corner. Przyrowski backed down, with a lot more to lose in the championship fight than the Belgian. Not everyone managed to keep it clean in the first corner, as Nacho Tunion and Alexander Jacobi ended up tangling. Both would rejoin, but there were no points available for either man. Juan Cota fancied stepping on the podium, and the man standing in his way was Ean Eyckmans, and so their duel was intense. Eventually, Eyckmans conceded, knowing he could still win the rookie race even if the podium was out of reach, with Cota claiming third. The battles were still ongoing to the flag, with Caden Higgins able to outwit Victor Dobransky, only for his opponent to retaliate in the next apex. It's not easy in Spanish F4. And as Przyrowski continued to hustle Strauven and keep him honest, there were more duels further back. Behind Hudson Schwartz, the Argentine talent Santiago Bastarrica was giving Kyoho Lee of Korea immense pressure in the dying minutes of the race, whether they were on or off the track. Both drivers were on the limit, using all the road, and in some scenarios, a little more than that. But incredibly, there was still no contact. Out in the lead, Thomas Strauven was about to make history as he joined the likes of Franco Colapinto, Nicola Tsoloff and the late great Delano Van 't Hoff, to claim the hat-trick of victories in one weekend, with a huge points lead, heading to the next event at Paul Ricard. Is he now catchable? We'll have to wait till France to find out.